Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Chris Hahn, the Aggressive Progressive. Check out a new episode of the Aggressive Progressive podcast every Tuesday. You know, the election is heating up just as the year is winding down. Stick with me. I'll tell you the truth as I see it. Download the Aggressive Progressive on Pandora or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yo, what's going on, y'all? This is Master Ace from Brooklyn, New York. And make sure you subscribe and download the podcast, Library Rap, the hip-hop interviews with Tim Einenkel.
My next guest has been representing hip-hop culture and music all his life since he released his debut album, The Devil Made Me Do It, released 30 years ago on December 4th, 1990, to his newest album, Safe Space Invader. Paris has been empowering and teaching people, all with an incredible flow, wordplay, and voice. Paris, welcome to the Library Raps, the hip-hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. Thank you so much for being here.
Man, right on for having me. I appreciate it.
I maintain me some act right. Little devil, get your facts right. Back where it all started. Not purple, but black-hearted. From the land where we hustle harder. Thought I let it go.
Cool. So I have to, of course, I want to start out with your studio albums and how you've kind of spread them out. Because obviously, like, I think, you know, I'm 41, so like you and I have come up in the time where there wasn't a quick turnaround, right? That people actually listen to albums versus like, you know, one song and then you're done. And you've done that with, you know, 1990 to 92, then Gorilla Funk 94, on, you know, 98, Sonic Jihad 2003, et cetera, up until now. Why have you continued this kind of, you know, nice separation of albums and have not gotten caught up in, all right, I'm, you know, it's 2020, I gotta release.
Well, you know, I want to obviously take the time to craft my craft. Right. And it's very easy to get caught up in this kind of McMusic approach to making things for the sake of making them and for having quantity over quality. And for me, you know, I don't freestyle for this very reason, because I'm very kind of measured in how I approach music and how I want things to come across. And, you know, I want the material that I put out to be able to withstand the test of time and to accurately reflect everything that I'm feeling and that I'm going through and that's happening culturally at any given moment. You know, so each one of these projects is a snapshot in time for what was happening at the time. And sadly, you know, they're almost interchangeable because things haven't really changed.
Right.
So, you know, I keep doing it. And the other thing too is I only do it really when it moves me to do it, you know, so I might not be as involved in hip hop at any given moment. You know, I know that's probably the realest shit that's ever been said in a hip hop interview by a rapper, but I don't give a fuck about hip hop half the time because it doesn't seem like it gives a fuck about us.
Right.
And the way that it is interpreted and the way that it's presented to listeners now is really done in an ultra commercial way where the majority of things that are emphasized to promote corporate culture and to promote consumption. So, you know, when you're an artist like me saying the kind of things that I say and that PE says, you know, and other artists that, you know, kind of swim upstream and go against the grain of what's traditionally being presented, you know, you got to be measured in your approach.
Yeah, I want to actually ask you, do you think, I mean, a couple questions there. Do you think, if if hip hop wasn't, or rap music, for not hip hop, but if rap music wasn't as commercially successful as it is, obviously it's the number one genre out there. Where do you think hip hop culture would be in terms of continuing to make music? I mean, because you do have, because I do feel that if many artists out there that are quote unquote hip hop artists coming up today, if rock was still the number one genre, they would be rock musicians, right? They wouldn't just be, because they're just doing it they're obviously trying to make the quick buck. So where do you think hip hop culture would be today if it didn't have so much commercial success?
I think the same thing can be said of the content of hip hop culture. I think if certain elements and certain themes were encouraged by labels, I wholeheartedly believe that hip hop would look completely different. I think hip hop, a lot of people who consider themselves being rappers gravitate toward what they think is popular and what they think labels want to hear. They take the direction that the label gives them, and they, it's kind of a cookie cutter approach to making music. So if you listen to a lot of the things on Billboard's Top 200, a great many of them sound the same, and it's a handful of producers that handle pretty much everything that's on that same list, and on these same songs that are presented to the public by way of large commercial entities, by Clear Channel, by Radio One and Entertainment One, and these big conglomerates that decide on which 10 songs to play 10 times an hour.
Right.
It's a very measured approach for them, and they want to have to capture as big a swath of the listening audience as they can, and they want to do it in a way that is as inoffensive and as generic as possible. Right. And that is what we see. And so a lot of times hip hop artists gravitate towards what they think is successful, and they want to be down with it. So it just really depends on what your motivation is. My motivation is to stay true to the art, because I came up in an era where art was emphasized and its importance was stressed, and where I was, quite frankly, able to be exposed to a lot of good art. I think there's an old adage that says you can't miss what you never knew. And I think a lot of these artists never knew, especially the younger ones, never knew good music. They never knew musicianship. They never have been exposed to things that came before them that, gave you a sense of music structure, that gave us a sense of true emotion being conveyed in music. The Stevie Wonders and the Isley Brothers and the, George Clintons and the Curtis Mayfields and the Earth, Wind and Fires. I mean, a lot of them are exposed to these artists by way of samples that other artists have used. But I don't even think that they really know the depth of what's possible in music. And so it depends on what your level of passion for it is and how deep you're willing to go. And, I can tell a lot about a person, and I hate to say this, but it's true. I can tell a lot about a person by what they listen to, in the same way that I can tell a lot about your level of consciousness based on what you eat. So, I just maintain the high road. It's never hurt me in the past. And, I know that the type of music that I make is not palatable for huge chunks of the population, but I'm cool in my lane. And I know that people that fuck with me, they ride with me and appreciate the fact that I'm, kind of staying on this path. So I'm thankful.
Of course, I asked you about your music, but I have another question I just thought about is that do you think we came up at a time where there was a lot of more diversity on the radio in terms of lyrical content for hip hop artists, right? You could have an NWA with the Public Enemy. You could have, Two Live Crew with Paris. That those would be played. Do you think the popularity of essentially hip hop being rap music being kind of more pop music ish now, do you think that played a factor in hurting the empowering lyrical content that was being played on the radio?
The radio was hurt by the internet. I mean, I don't think it's really been hurt by anything else other than that. And music in general, from what I can tell, they say that video killed the radio star. and it's true. I mean, when I think back of the people that I listened to growing up, it was nothing, and I mean nothing at all, photogenic about any of those artists. It was all solely based on the music.
Right.
It might be 30 people in each band, and they'd be, fat and unkempt and not put together and just not giving a shit about anything but the music. And that shit showed in the output. That they came across with timeless output that's revered by many, right? And so, yes, while it's true in the kind of in the early inception of hip hop, especially out here on the West, you could hear me, and you could hear Hammer, and you could hear Short, and you could hear Digital Underground, and you could hear Rapid Forte, and you could hear a lot of these things on local radio here at the same time, simultaneously, kind of living in this in their own respective space. But I don't think that has anything to do with the ascension of pop hip hop, right? It's just more so the prevalence of the internet and the increased focus on style over substance. You know what I mean? That we're living kind of in like the Kardashian era of hip hop now, where things got to be flashy and cute and shit, and kind of in service to this lifestyle of bottle popping and going to the club and not really thinking in depth about anything, just like materialism over everything.
December 4th, 1990, you dropped your debut album, The Devil Made Me Do It. And we're on the 30th anniversary. So congratulations with that.
Thank you.
The video and the title track, "The Devil Made Me Do It," was famously banned from MTV. Were you surprised that happened? I mean, did you expect that you could have a video that might be banned?
Well, the first video was the one that was banned. That was "Break the Grip of Shame." Okay. So that was the first one that I came out with, and that's the one I encountered a lot of resistance from. It was just a back and forth with MTV standards and with re-edits. And then there was just a certain point in time where the towel was thrown in and they were just like, we can't fuck with this. And I don't think they played the "Devil Made Me Do It" video at all. And it was just a kind of a confluence of events. It was me falling out with them about "Break the Grip of Shame." It was them not playing "The Devil Made Me Do It." It was them, I think, being reluctant even to play "Anti-Nigger Machine" by Public Enemy, which I was also in at the time in that same year. And it just became apparent very early on that outlet was not a friend to me, and that it was kind of that, along with "Sleeping with the Enemy" and, my turbulence with Tommy Boy, that all of that planted the seeds for kind of the DIY approach that I was forced to take, and emphasized to me the importance of ownership. And so those were the catalysts for me, kind of being on this independent path that I've been on.
I obviously wasn't. If I was able to interview you back when your debut album came out, this would of course be the question I would ask you. But can you kind of take us into like the recording process back then? Obviously, we're in a different time where people could email each other beats and record from their closet at home. So obviously, you were going to the studio and stuff like that. What were some of like those highlights that you remember of this recording process? But also,
don't. Any specific highlights? I know that the "Devil Made Me Do It" album was recorded on a 16-track half-inch Fostex. I do know that. It was a Tascam half-inch 16-track, and it was just kind of a basic analog equipment, and everything was new to us. I think MIDI was even new at that point in time, and went in and when you're buying studio time by the hour, and when you have to travel far to be able to actually do it, then you treat it seriously when you go in and you try to be as efficient as possible. But everything was the learning curve was pretty steep, and everything was virgin territory for us. It's like we are forging this path, and when you don't have any real guidance to show you one way or another, because I wasn't the beneficiary of having a producer with me. All of this was kind of learned on the fly. And it was a trial and error type of approach. So, I was able to soak up a lot of game and studio tricks just basically by observing and by doing things over and over again, and by realizing that, what I would leave with the studio more often than not sounded like shit. And so, I had to, go ahead and learn it and, just kind of hone my craft by observing. And, later on, I learned more and, became exposed to more and started dealing with musicians more. And, I can read music and I can play. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. So that helps. And that helped me going into it. But that's a completely different, being able to perform is a completely different skill set than being able to record and produce. Right. And, which was trial by fire, I guess.
Are you in search of deeper meaning in your life? Longing to manifest your true desires and unlock your full potential? Look no further than Portal Místico podcast, your gateway to treasure trove of transformative tools, enlightening interviews, and enriching content. I'm your host, Elena Maggio, and it's my heartfelt desire to guide you on this extraordinary journey of self-discovery. And with every episode, I'm passionate about sharing and introducing you to new topics in self-development, metaphysics, astrology, the law of attraction, numerology, interviews that will eliminate your path and fuel your own personal growth. This podcast is your wellspring of inspiration dedicated to help you uncover your purpose with unwavering passion. Together, we'll dive deep into the fascinating topics and explore endless possibilities. Listen to Portal Místico on Pandora, Apple Podcast, or your favorite platform.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, you were recording the album at a time, or so Public Enemy released their third studio album on April 10th of that year, Fear of a Black Planet. Mm-hmm. So was there any for you going to those albums just to kind of give a listen to see how they did it? Or
of course, yeah. Oh yeah. I always say, I've said this many times, there would be no me without Public Enemy. At least not in my current incarnation. The direction that I went in is a direct result of what they showed me as being possible in music, and of the weight of the importance of what they had to say. All that was not lost on me. But, stylistic influences, I mean, at least initially when I came out, was definitely Rakim. I always get, even to this day, I get voice comparisons to him, and kind of like vocal rhyme patterns to him, which is, hella flattering. Shit, you know what I'm saying? Because, he's kind of the alpha and omega of, what a hip hop MC is supposed to be to me. And then, and then there was Cool J influences and, what was cracking at the time, Ice Cube and Public Enemy, of course. And, I was kind of all over the place with the production. I didn't necessarily focus on any region in terms of how I wanted the sound to be. I just knew that I wanted it to be dark, and I wanted it to be ominous, and I wanted it to be something that complemented, how I came off vocally. So that was always a focus.
When we look at your the album in '92, "Sleeping with the Enemy," and you have two tracks that obviously stand out, would be the Bush Killer and Coffee, Donuts, and Death.
Right.
Can you take me back into 1990, 1991, 92 at this time to kind of inspire these tracks, and why were they not just important then, but also just as important today?
You know, the crazy part is those were just tracks that I recorded for the album. And that they weren't supposed to be the singles. They weren't supposed to be the standouts. It was the fallout from the censorship controversy that Ice-T had with Cop Killer, and with the drama with Tommy Boy, and with Sex Records and Cheetah Records and Rick Rubin and Luke and Atlantic and the whole Time Warner Music umbrella pushing back against that record and effectively preventing it from coming out when I wanted it to come out. All of that media focus is what makes people kind of reflexively associate Sleeping with the Enemy with just those two songs, right? But it was more than it was, you know, it was the Days of Old, it was a Sada song, it was a lot of other things on there that resonated with me equally as importantly, because it was supposed to be an album that was presented as representing, you know, the totality of the experience of Black people in America at the time, right? And so it wasn't just this like hood, like thug militant cop killer type shit. Yeah. I mean, that's the shit that is associated with it. Yeah. Did we, you know, mob on the White House? And yeah, of course. And did we, you know, was there an assassination of the president? Yes. But, you know, the record itself was intended to represent much more than that. Right. So when I went into it, when I made Bush Killer, it was just an expression of aggression. Nothing more than that. And the same thing with Coffee, Donuts, and Death. At the time, there was a cop that raped this woman, Nina Gelfand, in Oakland repeatedly. And it was something that, you know, resonated with me because police were, at least on the surface, supposed to be people that we trust. Right. That's never been the case for us in our community, but it was especially interesting to underline that fact with this particular record. And the officer in question was Black and the woman was white. People don't know that, right? So it was not necessarily solely a racial thing as much as it was now. I think now much more so it is. You know, police malfeasances definitely has a racial component now, but you know, the powers that be, so to speak, have been brutally oppressive with everybody on a class level for a long time. And that is really what I was trying to get across in that song and in Bush Killer was, you know, these instances of aggression. And in Bush's instance, the policies that foster economic inequality and, quite frankly, poverty. Poverty is violence. So, you know, the violence that was visited on Black people at the time by way of the Bush administration and by way of, you know, police malfeasance, all that shit is what I was talking about.
If there was a track for that album that you would want to be the kind of the conversation piece around, what track would it be?
I haven't thought about it like that, you know, because I got to, quite frankly, reassociate myself with it, man. Right. I haven't listened to it in a minute, but I, you know, I know that there are moments on there where that I'll listen to where, you know, the aggression and the rage that I was trying to convey are spot on. Like the entire Gorillas in the Mist track. I mean, for example, even though I use the Break the Grip of Shame music again, that level of rage and honestly anxiety, you know, I think it's conveyed the way I wanted it to. The Days of Old, of course, is kind of a lament on the condition of the community. Asada song is necessary. I actually wrote that after coming back from Cuba, and meeting Asada Shakur in person and having her ride with us when I was on the road down there. And when I met Fidel, so that entire experience was pretty deep. And I didn't know, she was Tupac's aunt, and I didn't know, really the depths of her involvement with the Panther Party until I returned. And it was just kind of an ode to Black women that I wanted to include on that project, and was something that was definitely going against the grain in what I heard hip hop artists doing at the time, even conscious hip hop artists, right? So it was just a way to include a component that made the entire album a whole, like a wholly presented project, with a lot of different pieces that represented things that I wanted to have included.
It ain't nothing but a style that set straight. And I'm raised right, so ladies still first, but smooth with the groove for the fools that doubt your worth. Still thinking of a master plan to protect and respect, cause the fact is I love the Black woman.
Another thing that stands out about, I think, about the project, and if I'm unsure, how much you remember about it in terms, because I know it was a while ago, and hip hop artists move on from projects while journalists try to dig deep and then want the hip hop artists to memorize everything. So what was interesting is that you worked with a much younger, obviously, version, a DJ Shadow on production for the album,
right?
And he's obviously continued going, and he's creating some great music as well. How did you guys connect, and what was the productions on the album that kind of made it work so well?
Well, I had a radio show in college at KDVS. I went to UC Davis, and Josh Davis, who is Shadow, is also from Davis. And so he would come down during the radio shows. And, and I would play some of his mixes on air and things like that. This is a long time ago. This is in 88, maybe. I mean, he was maybe 14. He was a youngster, and I was in college, so I was probably 19, right? And he would do his thing, and, and I realized that he was a bomb DJ, and he had a pretty intense depth of knowledge of samples and old school tracks and breakbeats and things. And I told him that I was going to be doing a project. This is even before The Devil Made Me Do It came out, right? I knew him before that project came out. And then when my second project came out, I don't know how we reconnected when I started getting ready to record Sleeping with the Enemy, but he gave me the sample for The Days of Old, and he did some scratching on Make Way for a Panther, I think, and the long version of Bush Killer. That's what it was. So he didn't produce the album, anything on the album, but he did contribute. He contributed that scratching, and he gave me that sample. So yeah, he's and of course he's had his own trajectory, which has been very successful, and I'm proud of him.
Are you in search of deeper meaning in your life? Longing to manifest your true desires and unlock your full potential? Look no further than Portal Místico Podcast, your gateway to treasure trove of transformative tools, enlightening interviews, and enriching content. I'm your host, Elena Maggio, and it's my heartfelt desire to guide you on this extraordinary journey of self-discovery. And with every episode, I'm passionate about sharing and introducing you to new topics in self-development, metaphysics, astrology, the law of attraction, numerology, interviews that will eliminate your path and fuel your own personal growth. This podcast is your wellspring of inspiration, dedicated to help you uncover your purpose with unwavering passion. Together, we'll dive deep into the fascinating topics and explore endless possibilities. Listen to Portal Místico on Pandora, Apple Podcast, or your favorite platform.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
So when Trump was elected, I had David Banner on the podcast, and he talked about how he envisioned that he thought this could be a kind of a quote unquote good thing in the sense where if Hillary Clinton was elected, she's such a skilled politician that she would be able to kind of, still do kind of shitty policies, but turn it in a way very charmingly that she's kind of helping as many people as possible. And Trump being not a good politician, it will just be exposed for what he is and what politics is in America. What was your initial thoughts when Trump was elected? And then how do you think, where do you think we are now?
I mean, this country has a long storied history of being shitty to people that don't have money and who aren't male and white. So, I figured it would be more par for the course than anything. And when he was elected, my initial feeling was that America got what it deserved. And let's see how it plays out, and I actually stopped posting on social media because I just didn't give a shit. Social media has never really been anything that I've cared all that much about. It's kind of a necessary evil in this new environment. If you want to have music heard, and if you need anything to promote at all, you have to engage social media. But I just didn't really care, and I was fresh off of my previous record, Pistol Politics, and it felt like more of the same, and it felt like a kind of a reflexive reaction to the perceived darkening of America by the ascension of Barack Obama, which is still just an extension of U.S. imperialism, and the more of the same and shit, but with a black face. But the appearance, just on a very basic level that white America was being diminished, was responsible for Trump's ascension to me. And, so a lot of the backward momentum that we've seen socially was to be expected. And, it's like motherfuckers get what they get. So it doesn't affect me, thankfully, as much, because I'm, I do okay for myself. I'm not really somebody that's affected by government policy at all. And I'm a casual observer of it. But, when it comes to voting and when it comes to being socially active, I had to put what's in my best interest aside and look out for those who are less fortunate than me. Right. And so that's kind of always been my approach, and am I in any real danger of having an adverse experience with police when I leave home? No, because I don't live in an area like that. Right. But it still resonates with me because I'm black, and because I know people, and I know where I come from, and I know what I've seen, and I know what continues to occur. Right. So when Trump made it, and everybody was, on the right was beating their chest about this kind of resurgence of making America great again and all this bullshit, I already knew that the emperor had no clothes with his bitch ass, and it was going to end up just pretty much how it ended. The sad part is the way that it's ending, and with this pandemic and people dying, and and the wholesale rejection of facts and science, and a moral compass that kind of should be commonly embraced. There are many people that don't fuck with it at all, and the rejection of these things has been normalized by a certain section of society. And I don't know if it's possible really to put that genie back in the bottle. And if it is, it's going to take somebody with real greatness that really has a true concern about people and really initiates change on a scale that I just don't think is possible for for a lot of people to really regain any kind of trust in our institutions. And should our institutions be trusted? I mean, there are people who don't fuck with it, for example, who are not going to fuck with this vaccine, for very real reasons. And so, we're going to see how it all plays out.
I mean, do you think, with going back to kind of the art and the purpose for this album, is that, would this album have been created if it was kind of Hillary Clinton became president and it was business as usual?
Yeah, because the business as usual is still never really shrouded in a way that's not detectable. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, these things that we've been railing against exist, and they have existed through all types of administrations. I have in my most recent video is called Walk Like a Panther. And there's scenes in there with Biden and Harris basically saying back to war, we'll be right back to business as usual. With the way things have always been, with our ongoing cycle of U.S. expansion, of U.S. imperialism, of brutality visited on people of color more often than not in other countries with natural resources that we want to take. That shit is an ongoing constant, right? War is a constant. War makes money. Each side is supplied. It is something that is as old as this country itself. And the associated racism that accompanies it, and the classism that accompanies it, all of that is baked in the cake. So it doesn't really matter who's in charge. The same people suffer. And
you also see that as well with, just even with media, with doing headlines regarding politicians, quote unquote, either distancing themselves from Trump as if that's an amazingly good thing that they're finally, they're doing it, as versus like, no, they're just as implicit with what's going on. That's not trying to normalize what they've been doing.
Well, everybody has their own respective agenda. And I think politicians now are reading the cards in terms of, the Trump's loss and, what that means moving forward. And so they're just trying to position themselves to come out clean as possible and to still be viable and to still, keep going back to the same pot.
On the album, Safe Space Invader, you ask, why reconcile bullying free, fuck peace? And it's a real call to action on the track Press On. What do you want listeners to kind of gain from that, and what do you think the next steps are?
I mean, that record is emotion. Of course, I'm analytical with things that I talk about, but also the medium is hip hop, and it's supposed to be emotive, and it's supposed to move you in one direction or another. There are people that hate the shit that I do and hate what I represent and what I talk about. And then there are people that love it and live it and appreciate the fact that I'm talking about shit that resonates with them. And, that record and pretty much every other record on Safe Space Invader is talking about the times. And when I say why reconcile, it's just that. It's not something that needs to be analyzed. It's like, why am I trying to be down with motherfuckers that don't want to be down with me repeatedly? Why, I am not of the mindset to be trying to put a flower in a cop's gun barrel.
Right, yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are on that kumbaya shit, hugging police. That shit is all over the internet and taking a knee and trying to work it out. I ain't trying to work out shit. Fuck it. If it's going down, let it go down. But don't stand around and watch somebody get choked out. I don't understand, 50 people standing around watching somebody die with their cell phones out.
Right. Yeah. True.
You know what I'm saying? That's some shit that I can't wrap my mind around that. Right. And we live in a society where the population is afraid of the powers that be, much more so than in a lot of other countries. In a lot of other countries, you know, the government is afraid of the people. And here it's the polar opposite. And I think when people's mindset starts adjusting, you start realizing that, you know, these enforcers in place in our communities that willfully oppress us and show, you know, kind of blanket disregard for our lives, you know, if they had any kind of a level of fear of real physical repercussion for the shit that they do. Same thing with politicians. A lot would of the negative choices they make would be corrected. You know, if politicians truly had to fear some shit actually happening to them for denying people benefits and for cutting back things that are good for people and, you know, and for lining their pockets, you know, for the purposes of, you know, promoting corporate malfeasance, if they had to actually fear somebody fucking them up, all that shit would change. And, you know, that's a brutal, savage notion for a lot of people who, you know, like to reference black militancy in a way where they state it's an antiquated notion and it's not something that's effective. Man, the language of America is violence, and violence has been very effective in America, you know, and I'm just asking people to rethink their approach to considering problems and to dealing with problems, and to rethink, you know, kind of what has been ingrained in us as what is acceptable.
You know, you look at all your albums, and you look at, you know, and you up until, of course, this album as well, and they're all so relevant in terms of subject matter, you know, like you know, at the time. You're welcome, of course. But how do you? I guess as an artist, that's, to me, just as an artist, that seems amazing. Like, that's great, right? It's just.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
But as a person, how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you kind of, you know, like, this is track I made in, you know, for example, track I made in '94 could just be played today and it would still be as relevant.
Well, I probably go on the record as saying it's a shame that shit is still relevant if it still resonates with people and conditions still exist the way that they did at the time. You know, if you can play a track about police brutality that I made in '92 and this shit is spot on in 2020, then, you know, something is wrong. Music is therapeutic for me, though, you know, and it's a way for me to get out what I want to say, get shit off my chest, you know, and I don't, it's not that I walk around angry, you know, like people that meet me, like, I joke around and talk shit and, you know, watch the game and like shit that everybody else like, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, people meet me and they expect Vader or some shit, you know, and it's not the case. It's just a way for me to vent how I feel, you know, and to speak to, you know, what a lot of other people feel.
You know, you kind of, I was reading an article, but it was a review of an album. A review of an album, and it talked about political hip hop being there's theories that political hip hop is dead. Do you agree with that sentence? Do you think political hip hop is dead? Or, I mean, what do you think the author gets correct or actually right about, you know, wrong about it?
It depends on where you're looking, and it depends on where your sensibilities lie. I read another article review saying that I've been making the same record for 30 years. Thank you. You're absolutely right. I have been making the same motherfucking record for 30 years, and shit has not changed in 30 years. So what's that tell you? You know, I don't have a problem with wearing that on my sleeve. You know, I want people to know that the output that I make and for the most part, that comes out on Gorilla Funk is shit that does go against the grain, and it is something that you're supposed to be able to feel good about, you know, and doesn't normalize like weirdo shit. You know, I see that a lot of times in hip hop. Like hip hop is, you know, they want it like society to be all things to all people, but 9 times out of 10, those things that they want it to be are shit that's not good for us. So, you know, I know my lane. I stay in it, and allow people to come in, go on this journey with me. Let's go for a ride.
So what's so 2021 happens. What's next for you, but also for Gorilla Funk?
I have no idea what you know. Shit, man. My output level in terms of Paris albums is, you know, I don't know how soon or if ever I'll do another one. I got other shit on my plate now. I'm doing a lot with Netflix, and I got a George Clinton album that I'm going to be putting out on Gorilla Funk that I've been working on what seems like forever. And then, you know, I have other artists on my label. T Cash, he got another album coming out, and you know, just miscellaneous movie productions and shit. So we'll see how it goes. I'm sure there will be enough drama over this next year, you know, to dust this mic off again and get at them like I've been known to. But let's see how it plays out.
Newest album is Safe Space Invader. He's, of course, honored to have Paris on Live and Rap, the hip hop interviews with Tim Einenkel. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Man, thank you. I appreciate it. Peace always.
Let's go resist and represent though. Let the tech blow. Ride for oppressed souls. Die for the right to know. Liberation of my folks. Holding court in the streets. Neighborhood respect. Gangland truce. Music peace. Keep the heat for the ones deserving. Only for the ones that hurt us. Only for the ones that try to undermine our people's purpose. Thank you for your service. This hard truth slapping is not intended for the...
Hey, I'm Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, in celebration of International Guitar Month, Pete Townsend of The Who will join us.
Pete went deep with us into his relationship with the guitar and with music in general, the new Broadway version of Tommy. He clarified the status and the future of The Who, and much, much more.
Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.